we're going to be making our Alebrijes, and it's probably one of your first times actually building something with this type of clay compared to, Play-Doh or air dry clay. So what we just want to remember with this type of clay is when it starts to get dry, it starts to crack. And so a typical easy way is to just dip your finger in the water and you can smooth out any of those cracks, and it makes those cracks nice and smooth and go away. We usually do that at the very end of our project, so that way it's nice and smooth, because anywhere that you have cracks it'll show up, or if there's little pieces that are sticking up, once they dry they get sharp like glass and they can cut you. So you want to make sure that you don't have any sharp edges when you're done with your project. The reason we don't use a lot of water is it starts to get really, really sticky, and then it gets too thin. And anything that's, you can see it's sticking to my glove right now, anything that's too thin, it starts to shrink when it dries, and they can break and crack easily. So we want to have thick pieces, but not too thick. Like for example, this big ball here would take forever to dry. So what we tend to do is we're going to break up our ball that you have into maybe about 4 things. So maybe I want this to be the head, this portion is going to be the body, maybe this little bit will be my tail, and this little bit will be my legs, and this will be my extra clay. So you've got 4 balls that you're going to be working with, and then you have your extra on the side. And say I want to be making a squirrel for my Alebrije, because I have that one image up on our screen. So when you take your ball, you can roll it in your hand, you can kind of squish it, and the shape doesn't have to be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I look, and he's got that really big back part, and I want it to kind of sit a little bit, so I'm going to flatten the piece here, and then I can kind of just squeeze the top part here, and now I have the start of my really cute little squirrel. So you can see that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my thumb in like we do our pinch pots, and I'm just going to stick it in there so that way it dries a little bit quicker and I don't have to worry about air pockets. Okay. So here is my cute little squirrel's body, as you can see. Here would be the back. This is kind of the neck area. This is its front little belly. Okay, so I'm going to set that down. And the next thing I want to do is the squirrel has these hind legs that come out. So I am going to rip this little leg part in half, and I'm going to roll this into a coil. And I don't want it to be too thin, so I'm going to push these edges together. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to cut it in half. And the nice part about clay is I can squish it into the shape that I want it to go. So see how this is a little bit longer, and then I'm going to kind of squish this side here so the hip is higher. And that's how I'm going to make my leg shape for the hind leg. I'll do the same with the other one. I'm pinching and squishing, kind of squishing. Now remember, I don't want it too thin, so you don't want it to be thinner than your pinky, because that's when it's going to break. So this is about the thickness of my pinky, and we don't really want things thicker than our thumb because it takes a long time to dry. So here's my other leg for my squirrel. Now what you're going to notice is you have a cup, and inside the cup is our toothbrush. And we're basically going to use this to help attach our legs. So I'm going to scratch where I want the leg to go. And if I just stick it on there, it'll stick for now, but it'll peel off really easy. So when you stick it on there, you're going to use your thumb, and you're going to, anywhere that you see where it's attached and you see a line. For example, you can see the line here. I'm going to use my nail, and I'm just going to try to make that line. Sorry, I hit the camera here for a second. I'm going to make the line disappear. If you don't like it going under your nail, you can use the back of your nail, and that way it won't go inside your nail. Okay. This way the leg attaches really well. And all these little other areas will go out and smooth at the very end, but you can pet your animal as you go and kind of smooth out some of those areas. Because I have a lot more work to do on it, I'm just going to leave that be. So here's one leg. Take my brush, do the same on the other side, attach it, kind of squish it on there really well, and then smooth out those lines so it attaches really well. Use that nail, kind of make sure it attaches, just like that. Okay, so now I've got my squirrel legs on, his hind legs, and put that there. And I'm going to take my other ball, and I'm going to break that in half too, and I'm going to make my little squirrel arms. So I'm going to do the same thing, make a coil, and if you end up like too skinny, just tuck it back on there and do it again. So here's one arm, and you're noticing I'm not using a lot of clay to build. So I'm not taking my whole big piece and saying that's the body, because that's just a lot of clay. Clay can stretch. I mean, this can get really long. If you really want to see, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. So if you wanted to make something like a coil or something to attach on anywhere, or a tail, you would just keep making your coil. But I don't want the arms that thin, so I'm going to piece it back together. And I could rip off some pieces if I don't like it. And there's my other hand. So I might curl it this way, smooth out any of those cracks, and then I would attach those just the same for my squirrel arms. Okay, so I'll speed this up and get that attached for us. So there's my body with the legs and the arms. And now I'm going to make that really cool bushy tail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off some of this clay here. And I'm going to kind of I'm going to squeeze this part down here because the tail got nice and skinny. The challenge is if you make it too heavy or too much clay, it's going to fall over. So you got to make sure you don't use too much. So I just kind of form my tail, right, like that cute little squirrel. And I'm going to try to attach it down here. So give it a nice little brush where I want to attach it. Stick that part on here. And you know, sometimes when you stick it, you lose some of those features that you really liked. And that's okay. That's the part of, not problem, but that's the part with clay, is you got to learn to, it's okay, and it's going to keep doing its own thing. All right, so here's my tail is affixed and attached. All right, I want it to bend and have it a little bit on there like that. So I'll leave that for right now. And then I'm going to use some other clay and I'm going to make the head. So I'm going to form the ball for my head. Right, so here's my squirrel's head. And then the squirrel has like a little bit of a nose. So I'm going to kind of pinch and form that face that I'm looking for. Okay. Alright, cute little squirrel. So here's his head. And then before I need to add on his ears. So I might take a little piece and make those cute little ears. I can attach that one here, right? And take another one. Again, they don't have to be perfect. It's however you want it to look and be. Try to remember where his head looks, right? So now, it kind of looks like a mouse, right? Instead of a squirrel. Doesn't have to be perfect. Might make his ears a little pointier. I know the one example wasn't, but my squirrel, it works. So here's that, and then I'm going to attach his head. So remember, I scratch it, stick it on there, kind of do a little twist. Okay, so I'm going to attach the head. You can see I got to give it a little squish, and then I'm going to squish those lines, you know, kind of smooth that out together so his head is nice and attached. If I don't do that, what happens is it's going to dry and then it's going to crack off because it's going to pull apart. So you got to make sure you get all those areas, even those hard to reach areas. Really try to get your fingers in there and get it together. So you can see my cute little squirrel. Here's his tail, his legs, his face, and all of that. Any areas that I want, I'm going to just smooth out with a little bit of water. You don't want to smooth it out on your tray that you have, because what I find is sometimes we push and smooth too much and then it flattens and it gets stuck on your tray like this, where then you have to scrape off your project, and nobody wants to do that. So anywhere that you have any pieces that are sticking out too much, you know, you really want to just smooth out your piece so that way it's easier painting and then it doesn't, you know, hurt you once it's dry. Perfect. Now at your table you also have a little skewer, and what you can do is you could add in some really cool details or lines. So maybe I just want to poke a little bit and give my squirrel some neat texture. I kind of like that. Some little dots. We're going to paint and glaze all of the eye details and some of those other cool things later. But if you want to help yourself and have some indents, you're more than welcome to draw that on there too. So I'm going to have like the eyebrows for my squirrel here. Maybe I want to, just to help remind myself, the nose is going to be here. And you don't want any of those little sharp pieces. So if you need to keep going, just take off some. Notice I'm not pushing very hard. My clay is nice and soft. So there's that for my squirrely. And maybe with his tail, I saw some really cool lines and designs. I might just draw a little bit of some lines for myself. And some of my details and patterns that I was thinking about doing, you're more than welcome to start doing that if you have time. But the rest of it we can paint and do that way. But there's just something about having some really neat details and lines as you go on your piece. So you might want to have some of those cool little line marks on my little squirrel. Okay. All right, once you're done, you're going to put it over on the board, your table number, and then with your name, and that is it.